So, coronavirus in sports. How deep is that economic hit? What's the latest on the stimulus check? Plus, the shifting sands of the Payroll Protection Act. We'll talk about all of that on the program. Welcome to the program Dollars and Cents. My name is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. We are Central Florida's longest running radio program, as aptly introduced by our good friend Bud Hedinger. Started back in the 80s by my now late father-in-law, Jack Nelson. The tradition continues today by me, yours truly, Joel Garris. We've got some exciting news for our listeners. Our network of stations is officially expanding on this Sunday of Memorial Day weekend. So certainly want to wish you all a happy Memorial Day weekend, and also hope you take a moment to remember what that holiday is all about. So it's certainly to take a moment and remember those that have died for this great country to allow us to be able to do all of the things that we do here in this great country of ours. So, but we are expanding our network, and so we have added, this is going to be our first week on 96.9 The Game. So now we're on the sports network. So previously we were on the Orlando News Radio WFLA network, which we're still on because we're now on multiple networks. So now we're on 96.9, but then the News Radio WFLA network of stations was 93.1 FM, 94.1 FM, and of course 540 AM. So that means we're on 4 different stations on Sunday mornings between 9 and 10. So if you've missed us before, hopefully you won't now, because we're trying to be everywhere, I guess, on it. And we're certainly excited to be on sports because at Nelson Financial Planning, we've had a long love affair with sports. Growing up as a boy in New England, rooting for the Red Sox, Patriots, they weren't that good back then, but it was certainly a fun time to be a Celtics fan, if I recall those periods of time with Larry Bird and the related cast that were on the Celtics at that point. And so nowadays we tailgate in Gainesville, where my wife graduated a few years ago, and we're also now tailgating in Auburn, because that's, of course, where my oldest son, Nelson, goes. And we've also happened to be, in the past, tailgating at Tampa, where, of course, the Bucks play. And speaking of the Patriots and the Bucks, my goodness, what a great, interesting season the Bucks have in front of them, or should I say the South Patriots. I mean, at the end of the day, that's, after all, what it is. It should be certainly an interesting season. Of course, 96.9 The Game is also home to the Magic as well, and my late father-in-law, Jack Nelson, was a huge Magic fan. He and June would go to every game. He had seats right behind the Magic bench. At one point a few years ago, he actually was named the biggest Magic fan. So we've got a long history of having a lot of fun with sports, and certainly the teams, the Bucks, the Magic, those teams that are on 96.9 The Game, we're excited to be on that same network. So enough of all that stuff. Let's start digging into, after all, what this show is all about. Dollars and cents, right? We help you make sense out of all of those different decisions that have anything and everything to do with your dollars. So there's still lots of confusion over the stimulus, and not a whole lot of clear guidance from the IRS. Of course, their 70,000 employees are all kind of working remotely, and they're going through the same kind of thing that a lot of businesses and maybe a lot of our listeners are going through, and trying to figure out how all this remote stuff works. And so it's been spotty in terms of the background or some of the details on how these stimulus checks work. Here's what we know now, and obviously this is subject to change, which is why, as we like to say in radio, stay tuned, because we're here to keep you updated as these things change along the way. So if you've already got your stimulus check, congratulations, good stuff, enjoy. You won't have to pay it back. It's not taxable income, and it won't change your refund for the year 2020. So that's good. But here's the key concept on that. it is based upon your 2020 return. So let's say you didn't get as much as you were expecting. Let's say you didn't get the full 1,200 or the full 2,400, and that was based upon your 2019 income. Well, if you're like most people, your income in 2020 is probably less than 2019. I mean, let's face it, this COVID stuff and the shutting down of the economy is affecting everyone. And so if your income is lower than what it was in 2019, it may make you eligible for a larger part of it, or may make you eligible for it if you were not able to get it based upon your 2019. So that's good news for folks that might have gotten a little shortchanged or didn't get it. If they see their income come down in 2020, they will be able to get it if they did not get it. Another example is if you had a child. If you had a child in 2020, you certainly wouldn't have gotten the extra $500 for them based upon your 2019 return because the child wasn't around. Child is born in 2020, you would be able to then get the extra $500 that would come as a result of that. So that's all good news. Here's where it starts to get a little murky. And I guess this would be the point where we would say kind of be aware of this situation. Let's say for some reason your income actually in 2020 was higher. Okay, maybe you were fortunate, was able to keep your job, and for some reason your income was higher. Maybe you wound up inheriting money. Maybe you wound up having to take a distribution of a retirement account. Whatever the case may be, let's say your income is higher. Supposedly you don't have to give it back, but here's where I would kind of be a little cautious, because I certainly think that at some point they're going to have a mechanism where they look at the numbers for 2020 and then sort of true up your actual eligibility for the stimulus check. So I would certainly go ahead and use your stimulus money, but just be aware that you may run into a little bit of a trap on that. And so you want to make sure that you're careful. That's the kind of thing that we will continue to keep you posted on this program. That's, after all, what we've been doing for 30 plus years on this program, is to keep people up to date on the latest changes that occur when it comes to your money. So certainly those are the kinds of things that we will keep you informed about along the way. But if you got it, great. If your income is changing for 2020, meaning going up, might have some mechanism down the road where IRS issues out some guidance that may require you to kind of true that up a little bit. If you got less and your income is lower for 2020, well, then that's okay. There is definitely going to be a mechanism where you can true that up, get that larger amount, or in the example of, I had a child and I missed out on the extra 500, then there's certainly going to be a mechanism on your 2020 return that allows you to sort of true that up. So some background, or I guess the latest and greatest on the stimulus check. In our next segment, given that this is our inaugural week on our expanded network that now includes sports here on 96.9 The Game, we thought only appropriate to talk a little bit about sports and the economy, and particularly the impact that this virus is having. And when you stop and think about the numbers really are staggering in economic terms, which is why, frankly, got to get all aspects of this economy working. So we'll talk about that when we return here on Dollars and Cents. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning on News Radio WFLA and 96.9 The Game. Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Dollars and Cents. This is your host, Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. We're Central Florida's longest running radio program. Also happen to be one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web, thanks to the accolade that the folks at FeedSpot gave us at the beginning of this year. We're excited that you're joining us. We're now on multiple networks. This is our first week here on Memorial Day weekend, so happy Memorial Day to you all. And now we are on 96.9 The Game, and of course our original station, News Radio WFLA Orlando, as well. So it's kind of neat to be on both. We thought, given it's our inaugural week on the Sports Network, that we would talk a little bit about sports and the economy and the effect that COVID is having. And when you stop and look at the numbers, it really is just staggering. And sports is going to be sort of one of those unique pieces of the puzzle of how we go forward with the coronavirus in terms of what that's going to look like and how that works. Because when you stop to think about it, sports is a big part of the economy, so you got to get it back working, but it is unique in the circumstances it presents, right? Because you've got close contact of players, swapping bodily fluids all over the place, and close contact of fans, right? High-fiving and yelling and all that, and then, large crowds. And when you look at some of the articles that have been written so far, there's a lot of speculation that these large crowds are some of the events that happen worldwide that accelerated the spread of COVID in particular areas. The Wall Street Journal this past week had an article talking about these super accelerators, and were tying them into sporting events. And one in particular that they mentioned was that there's a lot of speculation out of Italy that one of the reasons that it was so bad there was the decision to hold the Atalanta-Valencia Champions League match in February, and there is widespread belief that that really accelerated the spread of COVID in Italy, because you had 40,000 fans in the stadium in Milan, which turned the region of Lombardy, which is the region that Milan is in, into probably one of the worst hit regions on the planet. And that happens because you got a bunch of fans, they're all yelling. When you yell, you spread your spit particles, for lack of a more technical term, into a larger area. And because a game will take 3 hours, all of those people yelling, closed area, a lot more spit flying around, and ultimately a lot more COVID being able to be affected by individuals. So it turned that region of Italy into one of the worst hotbeds on the planet. And so that's going to be the tough thing about sports when you stop and try and figure out how do you bring it back. I mean, here are the numbers though on the economic side. I mean, we don't have a choice but to bring it back, because when you start to listen to the numbers on the economic side and who in fact is actually affected, and who it actually affects is predominantly the folks that can least afford to affect, meaning lower income workers. Let's face it, okay, when you go to an NBA game, it takes about 1,900 people to hold an NBA game, between the ushers, the concessions, and all that. A very small portion of them are the multi-millionaire players. Most of them are folks that are working a side job, trying to pick up some extra money, college kids, retirees, looking for things to... All of that is what makes up most of the workforce in a typical sporting event. And when you start to look at the numbers, when you talk sports, it's a $2 trillion worldwide industry, ranging all the way from the big giant stadiums that seat 100,000 plus, all the way down to the local Little League Association at your neighborhood park. And so it's a huge numbers. And when you start to kind of look at the damage in terms of revenue losses, and this is a study that comes out of Washington University in St. Louis, on the pro level, the revenue loss is almost $6 billion. College level, it's $4 billion. Youth sports, it's about $2.5 billion. And that assumes that MLB and MLS get back and play about half of their seasons. It doesn't include NASCAR, it doesn't include golf, it doesn't include gambling, it doesn't include outdoor recreation, which is a huge industry into itself. And it doesn't include the NFL or football. For the NFL and college football, the stakes are even higher. You would basically double the damage from that. It's 3 million jobs at stake. It's spreads beyond the millionaires that play the game. Most of the people in that make up those jobs, it's lower income jobs. It affects youth sports. It affects travel tournaments and the tourism that goes with them. So no question there's a significant economic impacts. Also, no wonder that the NFL sort of started to open up its facilities and to start to expand into being able to figure out a path forward, because there's just some unbelievable economic numbers here when you start to really kind of parse through it. And it at the end of the day, it's not just about sports. This is about economics. This is about helping people in terms of providing jobs that ultimately serve to supplement retirees, give summer jobs to college kids, those types of folks. Those are the ones that are certainly most directly impacted. It's far beyond sports. It's far beyond our love of sports. There's certainly some real economic numbers. So our hope is that for sports is to sort of figure out a way, right, to make it happen, whether that's mass on fans or players, and then so be it. Economically, the trade-off becomes way too great, and the length of time that trade-off will the economic impact will affect people can be a very long period of time, particularly because most of the people in sports are not jobs that they can do on a laptop. An usher or the guy that's selling you popcorn, he doesn't have the ability to do his job on a laptop, right? So it is that group where their income has gone to zero. So the hope is that somehow the sports world sort of figures out how best to be able to make this happen so that we can get back, not just for the love of the game, but for the economic realities that come with it. So we'll certainly continue this conversation, particularly now since we're on the Sports Network 96.9, in addition to News Radio WFLA, to really continue this conversation, because there's definitely some economic impact. There's definitely some financial intersection between sports and your money. So we'll certainly talk more about that on the program in future weeks. And as with any type of tough period of time, this virus is certainly producing a lot of financial hardship. And what's even worse is that the scam artists are coming out as well. We'll get into this more into the next segment, but AARP Bulletin, and we're holding it up for our viewers on our YouTube channel. You can find us on YouTube at Nelson Financial Planning. That's our YouTube channel. And we'll also post the article on social media. But the folks at AARP had a nice article on some of the things to watch out for as it relates to scams. And it's unfortunate. You go through a tough economic period of time, and these criminals just pop their head out and try and take advantage of people as much as they can. So we're going to get into kind of the details of some of the scams to really watch out for. Some of them are pretty wide ranging and certainly something for folks to be aware of. But what we'll do is we'll put the whole article on our social media. To find us on social media, just search Facebook at Nelson Financial Planning, or to find our YouTube channel where we put up the videos, because we do videos of the program where we put up those on YouTube. You can find our YouTube channel at Nelson Financial Planning. So those are the ways in which you can get the full article. When we come back, we'll get into some of the details that the article talks about for things that you can watch out for in terms of the scams that are happening out there today. Here on Dollars and Cents, Joel Garris, Nelson Financial Planning. Back to the program, Dollars and Cents. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. You're listening to Dollars and Cents, Central Florida's longest running radio program, one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. If you're interested in checking us out on our social media channels, you can look us up on Facebook. Just find Nelson Financial Planning, or you can go to our YouTube channel, that also Nelson Financial Planning. We put up videos of the program. during the course of the week as we video the program itself. We're excited. This is our inaugural week here on 96.9 The Game, and we are also simulcasting on our traditional network, which is News Radio WFLA Orlando. So we're on like 4 different stations at this point in time here in Central Florida. So if you miss us on one station, you'll catch us on the other. And of course, if you miss any part of the program, you can certainly catch our program, whether it's our video on YouTube, on our Nelson Financial Planning channel, or whether it's in podcast version. We're on Google Podcasts, iTunes, all that kind of stuff. Again, to find us, just search Nelson Financial Planning. And if you can't find us, the best option is to go to our website, nelsonfinancialplanning.com, and look at any of the icons in the upper right-hand corner. Click on it and you'll get immediately connected. So before the break, we were starting to set the stage for, unfortunately, what is always a byproduct of a tough economic period of time. And that is that the criminals like to surface. And we were talking a little bit about an AARP article, and we're going to post it on our social media channels so that you can read the full article in detail. But we wanted to share with you some of the highlights on it because I think it's important to watch out for the scam artists and the fraudsters that are out there, that are circling now, unfortunately, more than ever, ready to take advantage of you during a period of time that you really can't afford to be taken advantage of. And the scams are wide ranging. There's the official looking letter from Social Security saying that because of COVID, your Social Security benefits are going to be stopped or reduced. All you simply need to do to make sure that that doesn't happen is call a number and wire us some money or send us a gift card. Let me be very clear, okay? Social Security does not trade in gift cards, so don't do that. Don't wire money to the government. That's not how they operate. But these letters that they do, and we've seen these letters, are very official looking and very detailed, and it makes you think that it is real. Another one, it's the old email scam, right? It's an email offering critical supplies, masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, toilet paper, whatever the case may be. You order it, give them all your credit card information, and nothing comes. They've got your credit card information, and you've got nothing. Not a good thing. Some even go so far as to pretend that they are health officials and offering you to be first in line for a potential vaccine, and if you just simply pay some money. Folks, look, the reality is those are all scams. Stay away from it all. Here are some basic rules to follow. Watch out for the fake stuff, the fake government approaches. Government's not going to ask for a credit card. They're not going to ask for a gift card or anything like that. Go to the website, do your own research. Go to the website of a trusted charity if you want to help. One that you're familiar with, that's been around for a little bit. If a charity just got set up a month ago, I probably would stay clear of that until you do a lot more additional research on it. And then don't be tricked by fake news. I mean, go ahead and go to the CD. If you got some questions on this, go to the CDC website, go to other trusted news agencies, and they will certainly be able to set you straight in terms of what the expectation is for the reality of what you should be expecting, and not some of this fake stuff, not some of this scam stuff. So just be aware of that out there. Unfortunately, as we see anytime during a tough economic period of time, there is a significant uptick in criminal activity, and that's certainly the case with technology and with the ability of people to create fake letters, send emails, make things look real when they really aren't. So beware of that as well on for everybody out there in terms of knowing what you're dealing with. That is for sure. Speaking of knowing what you're dealing with, if you're familiar with the payroll protection program in the CARES Act, it's a moving target and continues to be more and more of a moving target. Now, just to recap, CARES Act, that was the big piece of legislation that was passed that provided those stimulus checks that we talked about earlier in the program. It also provided a program for small businesses to basically loan money to help small businesses pay for up to 8 weeks of payroll costs, mortgage, rent, utilities, things like that during the time of COVID. Any payments on the loan were deferred, whether it's interest or fees or anything like that. You got the money, and you don't really have to pay anything for the next 6 months. The thing that is attracting a lot of attention, of course, is the forgivable part of the loan. The loan is forgiven for amounts that are spent on payroll costs. So whether that's mortgage or rent and certain utilities between February 15 and June 30th, those are now sort of the general concept in the CARES Act. Okay, so those are the general concept that was that are in the piece of legislation. But now here comes the fine print. And as the Small Business Administration gets involved, as the Department of Treasury gets involved, and then correspondingly the Internal Revenue Service, you start to kind of have additional details get added in that may cause you to pause for a moment in order to figure out exactly what's going on with the Payroll Protection Act. And there really are three things to think about when it comes to the Payroll Protection Act, and some of the things that have really evolved since the CARES Act was first passed. And the first issue is actually a tax issue. There's always a tax issue, right? Anytime you do anything with the government, there's always a tax issue. Traditionally, if I have a loan and it's forgiven, let's say I have a $10,000 loan and it's forgiven, then that's going to result in income. I give you loan you $10,000 and I forgive the loan, it's $10,000 to you in terms of a business. In this case, because the loan is forgiven, the Payroll Protection Program loans, the loans get forgiven, then the amount that you borrowed, of course, would be excluded from gross income. But what about the expenses that you use that loan for? And here's where there's a significant battle brewing between IRS and Congress. Traditionally, if I have an expense as a business, right, then I get to write it off. Well, but if I got a loan that got forgiven because I spent that borrowed money on certain expenses, and that loan is not taxable to me, that's tax-free money, then if you write the expenses off as well that you use to pay that loan from, that you use the proceeds of that loan from, then you're sort of double dipping. And so the IRS has said, well, we don't want double dippers. We don't want you to be able to get a loan that gets forgiven that's not income and then be able to turn around and then also use the expenses that you use that loan money to pay for as a deduction in your business. So what that means is we've got a little bit of a debate going on between the IRS, who doesn't like the double dipping, never has, and Congress that says, well, wait a minute, our intent was to be as helpful as possible with this payroll protection program. And so we want businesses to be able to get the loan forgiveness and have that not included as income, and then be able to also write off the expenses that that loan gets used for. So interesting battle brewing in Washington between the IRS and Congress about this particular aspect, because this one is the legislation is most unclear of, and I think we'll get a little bit more indication of which direction. But right now, the folks in Congress are going to have to pass something to clear it up, because the IRS has clearly taken the position that they don't want people to double dip. So interesting development there on the Payroll Protection Program and the loans that are available to small business under the CARES Act. We got a couple more thoughts on that, plus some updates on some other things that have sort of changed along the way as the CARES Act was passed, and then the IRS and those folks are filling out the details. We'll do that when we return here on Dollars and Cents. This is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning on News Radio WFLA and 96.9 The Game. Welcome back to the program, ladies and gentlemen. Dollars and Cents here on News Radio WFLA and our inaugural week also on 96.9 The Game. My name is Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. Dollars and Cents, where we help you make sense out of all of those decisions that have anything and everything to do with your dollars. Want to Central Florida's longest running radio program. Also, at the beginning of the year, named one of the top 25 financial planning podcasts on the World Wide Web. If you're interested in listening to our podcast, you can find us on the various podcast channels like Google or iTunes, or you can go to our website, Nelson Financial Planning, click on the icon that's in the upper right-hand corner that looks most familiar to you, and you can get connected directly to our channel. We also do videos of the program as well. We put those up on our YouTube channel at Nelson Financial Planning as well. And then, of course, on Facebook, where we post articles like the article that we were talking about earlier in the program about some of the scams that are out there. Despite this being a tough economic time, that's sort of when the scamsters raise their heads and take advantage of people more than what they might normally do, because they know fear is high and they're able to play on that. So make sure you check us out on all of those different platforms. On the program, we were talking a little bit about some of the meat that's getting put on the payroll protection program, which was part of the CARES Act that gave loans to businesses that had provisions whereby they were forgivable. We talked about perhaps one of the biggest issues that's circling around the payroll protection program, and that's the tax issue, and whether you get to also deduct the expenses as a business that you used the loan money to pay. The loan forgivable, so that's not income, although traditionally it is, but the CARES Act said, no, that's not income. Well, the IRS then said, well, wait a minute, we understand that Congress said that's not income, and that's fine, but you're not going to also be able to deduct the expenses that you used those loan proceeds to pay. To which Congress said, well, wait a minute, that's not really what we meant, except the reality is Congress is going to have to resolve that. So we're going to hear much more about that and that tax issue that exists under the Payroll Protection Program. Also is the allocation issue. And the allocation issue, again, not in the CARES Act. This one was added by the Treasury. For full loan forgiveness under the Payroll Protection Program, you've got to take 75% of what you got in the loan and use it for payroll. Not part of the CARES Act, added in by the Treasury. And so you've got a formula that you've got to go through in order to make sure that you used at least 75% for payroll. Lastly is the employee issue. So anybody employed on February 15th of this year that's subsequently laid off before April 26th got to be rehired at their full salary before June 30th. Once you receive the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program loan, you can't make any salary reduction, you can't get rid of anybody or lay anybody off until June 30th. These are all pretty complicated formulas. If you look at some of the paperwork that the folks at Treasury and SBA and IRS have started putting out on this, it is incredibly complicated. And then there's a subgroup of folks where the salaries were reduced. Now, the reason why you hear a lot of folks getting their salaries reduced by around 20% is the threshold is 25%. If you reduce more salaries by more than 25%, then you undermine the loan forgiveness on the payroll protection plan. So suffice it to say, this is a moving target. And as we go forward, you're going to continue to see the IRS, Department of Treasury, SBA continue to kind of add their flavors of interpretation on it. And until Congress does something, then their interpretation, their guidance stands. So you got issues with the taxes, you got issues with the allocation, and you've got issues with employees. So good luck navigating the PPP. We're here to help. We'll talk about it a lot on the radio program and help guide folks in the right direction, and certainly keep you informed on the latest and greatest on what's going on with the payroll protection plan. Speaking of the latest and greatest, we also wanted to take some time on the program to sort of update people with the required minimum distribution. Now, the required minimum distribution is something that applies once you turn age 70 and a half, and under the Secure Act, different act, not CARES Act, Secure Act, that age got pushed to 72. But if you have a required distribution from a retirement account, it basically means you've got to take out a certain amount of money every year in order to satisfy these IRS rules that apply. Well, the CARES Act basically suspended the required minimum distribution for the year 2020. But what about those folks that may have already taken the required minimum distribution before the CARES Act was passed? Well, we've now got some additional information on those folks and how they can potentially replace that money and ultimately avoid having to report that as income on their taxes. Because remember, when you take a required distribution, then you've got to report and pay taxes on that money. So if you took your RMD from February the 1st until May the 15th, you've got a special 60-day window, meaning before July 15th, that you can put that money back in. Okay, so that means that even though you took your required minimum distribution, you're like, well, wait a minute, I don't really want to do that. I don't really necessarily need that money, and I certainly want to avoid the taxes. And if the IRS says I don't have to take my required minimum distribution from my retirement accounts, then fantastic, I will take advantage of this. So you've got a special rule that allows you to get it in, put it right back in by July 15th. So sort of a special 60-day window that's like longer than 60 days. So you can certainly take advantage of that. Now, if you took it in January, then that's where kind of another loophole exists. And the loophole there has to deal with COVID distributions from retirement accounts. You're allowed to take up to $100,000 from a retirement account and not have to pay any penalty on it for early withdrawal. That's true for anybody of any age. So if you took your required minimum distribution, you're not subject to a 10% penalty anyway, but the rules relating to a COVID distribution from a retirement account would kick into play. And in fact, you could have as much as 3 years, which is the length of time that you've got to repay that COVID-related retirement account distribution. You could have as much as 3 years to pay back the required minimum distribution. If you're confused, I don't blame you, okay? That's why our office also, beyond just the financial planning services and those kinds of things, that's why we actually do tax prep at our office, because all of these things, the investments and the tax side, start to really get pretty interrelated. So, but know this, bottom line, if you took your required minimum distribution, you took it early before CARES Act passed, and you're interested in returning it and avoiding the taxes on it, there are ways in which to do that. That is new, because there was a lot of speculation that you would not be able to do it if you were outside the 60-day window, but the IRS issued additional provisions that allowed you to have sort of a special 60-day window. One other thing, if you are taking distributions from a beneficiary account, a beneficiary retirement account, you can in fact suspend those for this year. There was some confusion early on as to whether the rules for suspension applied on a beneficiary or inherited account, and the answer is that is available to you. So know that you can also do that as well. Different stuff, it keeps changing every day. We'll keep you informed here on the program. And with that, happy Memorial Day. Thanks for listening in to the program. This has been Dollars and Cents with your host, Joel Garris of Nelson Financial Planning. News Radio, WFLA 96.9 The Game.